Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. It is mid-October 2022, which means it is that time of year when Adobe has their big annual Adobe Max conference, which means along with that comes all of their announcements around their major annual updates to their Creative Cloud suite of apps, including Lightroom and Lightroom Classic. Now, there are a ton of new features and fixes and enhancements. I'm not going to go into everything here. This is going to be my top 10 new features that I think people need to know about and get a little bit of an understanding of how they work. That said, if you want a deeper dive, be sure to check out my blog post, which I've linked below. That goes into all of the details, all the new functionality. It's split out by what's applicable to both versions of Lightroom and what's only in Lightroom Classic or Lightroom Cloud. And the same goes for this video as well. The first several features I'm covering here are applicable to both versions. So whether you're using that cloud-based version of Lightroom or Lightroom Classic, the first 7 things I'm going to talk about are applicable. From there, I'll go into something new in Lightroom Classic and finally wrap it up with a couple new features for Lightroom Cloud that you're going to want to know about. The only thing you really need to worry about here is that you've updated your apps. So these new features are going to be applicable in Lightroom 6, the cloud version, or Lightroom Classic version 12. So just make sure you're running those, otherwise you're not going to see any of this stuff I'm about to show you. Now, I've got a lot to cover, so I don't want this intro to go on too long. I'll wrap this up by saying if you like the video, of course, please do give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, turn on the bell notifications so you know when I release new content going forward, and if you want to help ensure that I can continue to do this and produce high quality content, I would really appreciate it if you hit the thanks button down below to make a small contribution that goes directly to me after YouTube's cut. But regardless, I would certainly be appreciative of that support as well. With that out of the way, let's just jump on in. All right, so as I just said in the intro, these first several examples are going to be available in both versions of Lightroom on desktop PCs and Mac. So both the cloud version and Lightroom Classic. I'm going to be showing them or demoing them in Lightroom Classic only, but just know that they are available in the other version as well. So that being said, the first thing to show off here is probably the biggest entirely new feature to come to Lightroom for this October 2022 update, and that is content-aware healing. And much like the new masking that came a year ago, it's once again leveraging artificial intelligence to improve the functionality of the program. Taking a look at this first image here, let's just assume we've got a few different areas that we'd want to address with traditional spot removal or healing within Lightroom. If I zoom in on the image, we can see we've got somebody in frame here. There's a little bit of a brighter distraction up in the corner here. And maybe, we think this lighter patch of rock face here is a little bit distracting and we want to get rid of that. So just as we always have, we'll come over to the little Band-Aid icon here to open up our healing panel. But now right away, we see we've got a little bit of a different interface here. And the very first mode that's highlighted is Content-Aware Remove. Now we still have the traditional heal and clone tools as well, so those haven't gone anywhere. But again, we've now got this AI-powered tool for content-aware removal as well. So if we start off and let's just zoom in on this little tourist lady or person that snuck into my image. The concept works exactly the same as it always has. You've got a brush that you're just going to paint onto the image or select a single spot on the image, and then Lightroom is going to analyze the entire image and determine how best to heal or repair or remove that object that you've painted on. Now, as I start painting here, you'll notice another difference in that they've updated the overlay, whereas before it was a solid white overlay, which made it very difficult to see what exactly you were painting over as you did it. Now it is completely transparent with just a simple outline, so you can actually see what you're doing, which is a nice little tweak. So I'm just going to paint over this, and we'll paint over the railing that's there a little bit too to get rid of that. And as soon as I let go of my mouse button, you'll see that it's going to analyze the image and then do its thing automatically using that AI algorithm to make the best determination it can to fill in that space naturally. And so we can see with this default result, that's done a pretty good job. If I toggle this on and off, you can see the before and after. It's pretty good, but it's not quite perfect. We've got some little branches that are being pulled in here that don't really make sense in terms of the surrounding foliage. So just like you could do with the heal and clone tools, as long as you've got that selection still active, you can hit your slash key and it'll automatically regenerate and try to produce a different and better result for you. The other way you can do that is just continue to up here, hit the refresh button, and it'll continually reanalyze the image and try to come up with a new result. So here we've got one that looks pretty good actually. But the other thing you can do is by default, it's scanning the entire image to try to pull together what makes the most sense in terms of sourcing other pixels in the frame and filling in the spot you've painted on. But the other thing you can do is if you come out and hold down Control or Command on your keyboard and click and drag, you can set a defined area from which you want Lightroom to pull or analyze to fill in the spot you're trying to heal. So once I let go of my mouse button again, it's going to use this selected area or the selected box instead of scanning the entire image for options. And once again, if I move my cursor out of the way to remove the overlay or the outline, you can see that it's done a pretty good job. If I wanted to take another stab at that, if I just hit refresh, it's going to once again scan the entire image. So if I wanted to make another selection, I would simply hold down the controller command key again, click and drag and create another box. And once again, it's going to generate something based on just that area that I've highlighted. Just like with the heal and clone tools, you still have the ability to adjust the opacity of the spot that you're trying to heal or repair. However, you'll notice that you don't have the feather tool because it's using an AI algorithm. It's looking at how to blend it in with the surrounding pixels on its own. So you don't really need that feathering control like we're used to seeing on the, again, heal and clone stamp tools. Just to show another example really quickly, I'm going to zoom back out here and let's just say over here, I don't like this lighter patch of stone or rock face. I can once again just come in here and quickly paint over this. You'll also notice, or you should notice, a performance improvement as well, as they've done a lot to improve all of the tools, not just this new content aware, but again, the heal and clone tools as well operate much more smoothly compared to what they were in the past, which is certainly another welcome addition. But again, using content aware, painting over this and waiting for my result, I get this. However, if I look at the icon, I realize I didn't actually use content aware. I used the clone stamp because that's the last tool that I had selected. So if I right click on this, I can change it using the other tools. So I can still go back and use that same selection and go ahead and generate a content aware remove result as well. And you can see that without having to change the spot it's pulling from or anything like that, it's doing a pretty impressive job of blending in that result with the surrounding pixels. Now, once again, I could come over here and if I don't like the result I'm getting, hold down Control or Command, click and drag the box, and tell Lightroom I only want you to pull from this section in terms of analyzing the image and pixels to come up with the best content aware fill. So again, I think out of what's brand new in these new versions of Lightroom, this is probably the single biggest thing that's entirely new that we haven't seen before. There are some other huge updates, but they kind of build upon pieces that were already in place with last year's update to masking. But again, this is a pretty long overdue and very much desired update that they've brought in. And this should really be a huge improvement from having to play around with the heal tool or trying to clone different areas and get them to match the area you're trying to repair. So definitely a welcome addition. Now, speaking of the other big updates that are included in these new releases, let's close out of this image and jump over to a portrait photo so I can start showing you what's new in masking. Okay, so here I've just pulled a stock portrait photo off of Envato Elements for the sake of example, and we'll start taking a look at what's new here in terms of building upon that masking foundation that was rolled out last year with Adobe Max 2021. They've continued to build upon it bit by bit throughout the past 12 months as well, but this is really the first big leap we're seeing forward in terms of additional functionality built onto that masking foundation. And the first thing to talk about here is the inclusion of people masking. So now when I come up to my masking tool and I click and open it, if you watch closely, there's an indicator down here saying detecting people. So every time you open that masking panel for the first time, Lightroom is going to automatically scan the image to make a determination if there's a person or a group of people within the image. If it does detect a person, you'll see that person or several people indicated down here with these little avatars. And if you hover on the avatar, your mask overlay will highlight to show you what exactly it's selected. The mask hasn't actually been created. It's just letting you know that it has detected a person or people within the image, and you can get a preview of what the mask will be if you do opt to go ahead and create one. Now, this particular example obviously only has one person, so let's jump over to another example that I pulled off Envato. And you can see once again, it's scanning the image, detecting people, and now we can see we've got 4 options. We've got all people, person 1, person 2, and person 3. So the great thing here, obviously, is not only does it detect people automatically, but it gives you the option of, do you want to create a single mask that includes all of the people, or do you want to create individual masks for each person it identified? Once you make that determination of whether you want one group mask or one individual mask, assuming there are more than one person in the image, that then segues into the next big feature that they've added into both versions of Lightroom, is people masking components. So let's just select, let's go with person 3. And it's detecting the person features. So this gets into the components piece. So by default, If you opt to create the mask via the button down here, it's going to create the mask for the entire person. That's the default selection. However, you can see that you've got multiple different options that allow you to create mask subcomponents or submasks, for lack of a better way to put it. As I hover on each of these, it'll also show what it's detecting as that particular component. So if I just go down the list here with face skin, you can see it's highlighted just the skin on his face. Body skin's got the rest. Eyebrows. Eye sclera. A little controversial. This is just eye whites. Why they chose the Latin term for us English-speaking people, I don't know. But eye sclera, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'd never heard of this term until this version of Lightroom came about. But anyways, it's eye whites. Just keep that in mind. Iris and pupil would obviously be the colored part of the eyes. Lips, teeth, and then hair. So again, by default, it's got the entire person selected, but I can say, you know what, I only want to make adjustments to their skin, and just click both of those, and I can ask it to create two separate masks, or if I untick this, it would just create one mask that includes basically all of the skin that it's identified for that individual. So they've done a very nice job of giving you a lot of control here in terms of how you create the mask, whether it's for the full person, parts of the person, whether those different parts are grouped into one single mask as you select them or as you create the mask for them, or if you generate 2 or 3 or 4 separate masks for each different component of the people mask it's identified. So for the sake of example, I'm going to tick this back on to create 2 separate masks. I'm going to hit create mask. And now we can see I've got a mask 1 group with person 3 face skin. If I hover on that, it highlights or shows the overlay for the mask. If I expand out this mask 2, you can see I've got person 3 body skin. And again, if I hover on that, it shows what areas of that person it's identified as the body skin. Now, this automatic detection isn't always perfect. Obviously, you may want to tweak it or adjust it or add other elements in it. So just like any other masking that we've seen over the past year, you still have the ability to add or subtract. If you hold down the Alt or Option key on your keyboard, you've also got the ability to intersect. You've got all the same functionality in terms of mask combinations or whatnot that still allow you to really refine and hone in on exactly the selection you're looking to make. I do like that they automatically name the mask within the mask group to let you know what component it is. Although it is a little unfortunate that they didn't just name the mask group that way, because you still have to expand each one to identify which component it was. Obviously, you can hover on them, but if you could just see it visually by the mask group name, that'd be a little bit nicer. Maybe we'll see that in a future update. So the people masking is obviously a huge update in terms of the existing functionality of masking that they added a year ago. But it's also obviously going to be most beneficial to portrait photographers or people that are taking photos of people regularly, whether it's professionally or family photos or what have you. However, they haven't left the rest of us, myself included, who, I'm mostly a nature photographer. They haven't left us completely out of the game, as they have added another new masking feature, which is object masking. So if I jump over to a different image for this example, so one of the biggest complaints when Lightroom masking rolled out a year ago is that you didn't have a whole lot of control, especially when it came to selecting the subjects within the masking tools. So you'll notice another difference when I open the masking panel now. Not only is it doing a quick scan, and obviously here no people were found, but also we've got a little bit of a different layout here now. We still have our subject and sky masks that we saw rolled out last year. They've also added a new masking for background, which I'll demo here in a little bit. But you've also got a new masking tool called Objects. Use selection tools to mask objects in the photo powered by AI. So another AI-powered tool being added into the masking platform. Now, to really illustrate the difference here, if I were to use the previous versions of Lightroom that had masking, my only option here would be either to brush in to try to create a mask for this structure here, or I could try using subject masks and see what the AI would generate. In this case, it does an okay job, but it doesn't actually select the entire structure as I would like. It's not capturing any of these little kind of shadowed concrete areas down below. So if I delete this out, I can instead come in and go to my Objects masking tool. Now, when you click into this, it gives you a brush. And the intent here is you don't have to be terribly precise. You can just loosely brush over the object that you want to select or create a mask for, and Lightroom will use the AI algorithm to make a determination of what exactly you're trying to select. So let's just do that really quickly here. And it's done its analysis, and now you can see it's done a pretty good job. It has pulled in some of the treetops that I'd have to go in and manually correct, but it's done a far better job of getting that object selected than what we could ever do in the past with just select subject, where we had zero control other than adding or subtracting other masks and what have you. So right off the bat here, I'm in a much better position using this new objects masking tool than I ever would have been with the subject masking. Another great example of this is on this other shot from the Oregon coastline, where if I were to use the old select subject masking tool, Lightroom by default has no clue what the subject is. It selected the sea stacks or the rocks out there in the water pretty well, but then it's also pulled in the waves and only part of the waves, not even all of them. So this mask is just kind of a mess. So again, if I delete this out and create an object mask, I can just come in here and loosely paint over this. It doesn't, again, need to be terribly precise. You don't even really need to fill in. And you can see just that quickly, I've made a way more accurate mask in terms of what I was trying to select than what I got with the select subject masking tool. Now, the other thing I can do here is by default, when you first use this tool, it's set up that it's using that brush-like effect for you to select the object you're trying to mask. If I delete this out though, and go in and say, I want to create an object mask again, if I look down just a little bit further, I've got select objects and I've got mode. So by default, your first option is that brush select mode, but there's also a rectangle select mode. So when you do that, now your cursor is at crosshairs, and I could simply come out here and say, you know what, I want this general area to be considered the area I'm trying to create a mask or an object mask for. Once I let go of the mouse button, it's going to automatically analyze and detect it and pull it in as best as it can in terms of that masking. Now, in this case, you can see using the brush tool was more accurate because it did pull in more of the water than what we had on the first mask I created. But it's an example, again, of another option you've got in terms of how you're selecting your objects for your mask detection and creation. This also works pretty well for things like product photography. Now, if I were to come in here and use select subject, as was only available to me previously, Lightroom's trying to do its best to figure out what exactly is the main subject of this image. In this case, it's picked up 2 of the 3 chairs, but not the third one. But also, let's say I just want to pick, or I just want to edit that one chair. So again, let me just delete this out, and we'll show a quick example of what we can do with this new object tool. Once again, it's got my default brush select selected, so we're just going to leave that. And we're just going to come in here, we're just going to paint over this thing really quickly. Let's just grab that little leg down there. And now you can see I've been able to select this single chair as the object that I wanted the mask created for. Now, again, it's not perfect. It's picked up some of the shadow in the flooring here. It didn't pick up the back legs, even though I specifically painted on this one to try to get it captured. So you still need to make some tweaks occasionally, but again, you've got the ability, just like any other mask, to add, subtract, or intersect to modify and adapt the mask as you need to. So that's another huge improvement or huge advancement in terms of the masking tools that we've got available to us now in Lightroom. Now, if I go back to another portrait photo, we can take a little bit more of a look at the other new masking feature that I alluded to earlier, which is that background mask option. So before, if you wanted to select the background, especially before the people masking, you would have done select subject, it would have done its analysis. Hopefully in this case, it would have picked up the woman pretty well. And then I would have had invert the created mask to work on the background instead of the actual subject. So now, to eliminate some additional clicks and having to invert and do all that stuff, now you've just got an option for creating a background mask automatically, again, powered by AI. So if I click on this, it's going to analyze the image, detect what it determines as the background, and automatically create a mask for it. And once again, we can see that it's done a pretty impressive job doing so. This also works on group photos. So if I go to this example here, we can see it's detecting the people. And it's done a good job there. But if I just want to create a background mask, again, I'm just going to click on this, let it do its thing. And we can see it's done a pretty good job of selecting the background and excluding the people. You can see even down in this little gap between them, it even identified that as part of the background, which is pretty impressive. So this one's not necessarily earth-shattering like Content Aware or the new people masking tools or object masking. So the value of this new background masking is really going to be, I think, heavily dependent upon the image, and probably most valuable to portrait type photography, where you've got clearly defined individuals Obviously, if you had an image with a clearly defined subject, whether it be an object or an individual or an element of a landscape, it's probably going to do a pretty good job there too. Now let's jump to another group photo here. This next feature isn't directly part of the masking toolset, but it's leveraging the new masking tools in terms of the people masking to bring to the table new adaptive AI presets. So once again, we can see it's automatically detected all people, person 1, person 2, person 3. This one struggles a little bit with the poor child in the background. It's not recognizing as a person. That aside, you can also see it's struggling a little bit just with the kind of intertwined arms and heads and bodies and whatnot. We're going to leave that aside for the time being and just look at, without creating any masks, our preset panel. And we know that earlier this year, they added in adaptive sky and adaptive subject AI-powered preset tools. And now we've got adaptive portrait added in. If I expanded this out, you can see there's quite a few different options here. Just like the previous adaptive presets, as you hover on each one, it'll first detect the applicable subjects or people in the image, and then it'll show you a preview as you hover on each of them of what it's going to do. Now, some of these are pretty subtle. They might be a little bit difficult to tell in the video, but I'll go over each of them and I'll show another example real quickly as well. So if I move back and forth on and off of Enhanced Portrait, you can see, again, subtle. It's kind of doing a combination of things. It's smoothing the skin a little bit, brightening the eyes a little bit. So it's a combination of factors being applied here. Glamour Portrait looks like it's adding kind of a lipstick effect, almost a makeup effect on the skin. Gritty Portrait's really ratcheting up the texture or the clarity in the skin. Enhance Eyes, if I kind of go on and off of this, you can see it's brightening the eyes a little bit. Whiten Teeth is self-explanatory. Darken Eyebrows, texture hair, or smooth hair. Now, if I jump over to this other group photo we were taking a look at a moment before, and again, same thing, it's going to do the analysis, detect. It's finished detecting, so now as I scroll through these, we can see the different effects that each of these adaptive presets is having on the image. So let's just say I want to do Glamour Portrait. I'm going to click on that. And now you can see almost instantly it dumped in all of these new masks over in the masking panel. So it's got face skin, eye sclera, eyebrow hair, etc., etc. As I click into each of these, we can see the submask that's included within the mask group. Now, conveniently, it did name the mask groups with the applicable names, unlike the people masking or the people component masking, where it just had mask group 1, mask group 2, and you had to click into each one to see what it was. These conveniently and somewhat inconsistently compared to the people masking is naming the groups in a more useful manner. But the other thing here is you can go down and look at your actual settings and see what exactly are these adaptive presets doing for each of them. So the face skin, it's cooled off the temperature a little bit. It's reduced the texture a little bit, clarity a little bit. If I were to look at the eye sclera or the eye whites, not surprisingly, it's boosting the exposure a bit there and also reducing the saturation, probably to help hide any bloodshot eyes or anything like that. So you can see exactly what it's doing for each of these as you click on them. If I go to another portrait photo and let's just choose Whiten Teeth, because again, the Enhanced Portrait and Glamour Portrait is going to be applying multiple effects to the single image all at one fell swoop like we just saw. But let's say I just wanted to do Whiten Teeth on this one. Now I've got a mask group for teeth. And as I hover on that group, you can see the overlay. Now, it is worth mentioning that unfortunately right now, I don't know if it's a bug or just something that needs to be tweaked, but if you look at the overlay, especially on this gentleman's teeth, for this new teeth adaptive preset that was created, it's not as accurate as the mask that's created through people masking for teeth. So if I were to come in here and just create a person mask and say I just want a person mask for each of these individual teeth, those masks are more accurate. This one's only selected about half this poor guy's teeth for whatever reason. So hopefully this is something that gets fixed relatively quickly, but you get the idea of what they're working towards here is a single click to allow you to make a quick modification or a quick adjustment to an image without having to go in and do everything manually. Now, the other nice thing is, unlike the adaptive sky and the adaptive subject presets that we saw roll out earlier this year, those only allow you to apply by default one of each applicable presets. So if I wanted to use subject pop, if I clicked and had the mask created, if I came in here and then said, you know what, I also want to apply subject soft, the only way to do so is through a kind of clunky workaround, which I do cover in another video you can take a look at. But by default, these new adaptive portrait presets allow you to use multiples on the same image without having to jump through any hoops or do any workarounds. So I've already added whitened teeth. Let's say I want to do smooth hair. I can now add that one in. And instead of removing the teeth mask as we would have seen with the sky and subject adaptive presets, it's just added in a new mask group for their hair. And you can see here, it's done a much better job of selecting the hair compared to what we saw with the adaptive preset for teeth. So again, some work to be done here, but certainly a big step in the right direction in terms of streamlining workflows and really helping you work faster. The other thing to note here is, unlike the people masking, where you've got the ability to choose whether you want everybody included or just one or two individuals or what have you, these adaptive portrait presets are automatically going to apply the adjustments and the masks to every person it identifies within the image. So to change anything, let's say I applied this hair preset. If I wanted to exclude, say, the two gentlemen on the left and right, I'd have to subtract out using a brush or radial mask or what have you. So you could easily modify it, but just know that by default, the adaptive portrait presets do include everybody in the image, whether you want them to or not, and then you can go in and modify from there. Now, the last big thing to show here that is applicable to both desktop versions of Lightroom, again, is loosely tied to masking. It's not really building upon it, but it's kind of providing a fix for an issue that involves AI masking within Lightroom. So let me jump back to this coast photo from Oregon. And for the example, I'm going to zoom in here. And let's just go right there. And let me actually delete these masks. And we're going to go to the healing tool first. And I'm just going to grab heal. And let's say I want to remove this bird here for whatever reason. I don't like that bird. I'm okay with that one, but I want to take this one out. So as we can see right now, it's done a perfect job of removing the bird from the scene. If I were to come in and make additional adjustments, there's no issues. The bird is still perfectly removed. Where we get into a problem, however, is if I come up and I create a sky mask and I make some adjustments here, we're still good. That bird I removed is still perfectly removed. There's no ghosting or artifacts or anything like that. But if I come back up and I go to my healing tool and I say, well, now I want to remove this other bird, after I've created that AI generated mask, the sky mask, initially we're all good. It still did a really good job of removing that bird. However, there is just the faintest little bit of a halo there, and it's going to be hard to see. Let me see if I can enhance this a little bit more to make it stand out. So now we can see, hopefully it's showing up on the video. I'll zoom in, but there's just the faintest little outline of the bird or ghost of the bird that's there because I created that healing spot after I created the sky mask, which is using the AI algorithm or AI machine learning process. And that healing tool that I used is being applied to what the sky mask originally was. It's not updating automatically. In the past, the only way to fix this was to start deleting masks and recreating them and going through this whole mess of a workaround. Unfortunately, Adobe hasn't fixed the full root cause of this issue, but fortunately they have provided an easy fix for it. So we've got this little remaining halo of the bird there now. Instead of having to delete the mask and regenerate it, and maybe redo the healing tool and things of that nature, now I just need to go into the settings menu while I've got this image selected and choose Update AI Settings. By doing so, you'll see it reanalyzing the AI mask in the image, and once it's done, that little ghost of the bird is no longer there. So it's not a total fix, but it is a much simpler fix than having to start deleting and redoing stuff and all that. Now, this does exist in the cloud-based Lightroom app as well. However, it's under a little bit different menu. So if I come in here, I don't have any masking on this particular image, but you come into the photo menu here, and it's grayed out right now because, again, I don't have a mask, but you'll see the Update AI Settings in one photo here. You can do it on one photo, or if you had multiple photos selected, you could run into multiple photos at once. But it is under the photo menu instead of the settings menu as it is in Lightroom Classic. Now, there is something I want to call out here. It's difficult to know when you have this issue unless you visually identify it. Adobe has kind of added a call out, but it's rather hidden. So let me go in and let's just remove this other bird here on this AI mask. Again, it's done a good job, but there's a little bit of a haloing there. If I darken this down or brighten it up, let's see where we can get that to show up a little more. Again, it's very faint, but there is just a little bit of the ghost of that bird right there. Right now, I don't see any indication that there may be something I need to look for or consider updating the AI settings to address. I don't see it until I open the masking panel, and even then I still don't see any kind of warning that there may be an issue with one of my AI masks until I click on a mask group that includes an AI mask. Then I get a message down here saying select sky adjustments that may affect sky 1 changed. Now I can also update this right here. So instead of going into that settings menu or the photo menu, this is another indicator that you may have an issue you need to address. Not every image is going to need this because the healing tools could be applied where they don't interact with an AI mask. But Lightroom right now is looking at the entire image and saying if it's got an AI mask and it's got a healing tool applied, there may be an issue. So this is a maybe, this isn't a definite. So just keep that in mind as well. Obviously, if you visually identify that there's an issue like the ghost of the bird here, you know you've got an issue to fix. So you can go ahead and just update the mask. You could ignore it if you don't see anything visually. You know, it's really up to you. But if you hit this update button, again, it's going to detect the sky again. And now that little halo of the bird has once again been removed. And at this point, we're done with the major updates I want to cover in this video that apply to both desktop versions of Lightroom. I've got 3 more bigger updates I want to cover here. One of them is for Lightroom Classic, so we'll show that right now while we're here. And then the last 2 are applicable only in the cloud-based version of Lightroom. We'll take a quick look and we'll get this video wrapped up. So the next thing I'm going to show here that's only applicable to Classic, it's not groundbreaking or anything like that, but it's kind of that's nice. It'll probably be much appreciated by left-handed users that are working with touch interfaces like a Surface tablet or something like that. But if we go into our edit menu and go to preferences, and then jump over to interface, we can see we've got some new options for panels here for swap only develop left and right panel groups or swap left and right panel groups. So if I tick these boxes or one of these boxes, it's going to take whatever panels are on the right and move them to the left, whatever are normally on the left and move them to the right. So in this case, all of my editing tools would jump to the left, my presets and collections and those menus would jump over to the right. Now, this does require you to restart Lightroom for the sake of applying these changes. So let's just use the magic of editing. I'm going to tick this box, hit OK. Nothing's going to change, but we're going to give it a second. And hey, just like that, through the magic of video editing, it is instantly switched over. So now we can see all of my editing tools are on the left and everything else is over here on the right. I don't think too many people are going to be using this, but again, it's a nice little feature that's been added in the Lightroom Classic. And then to round out this top 10 list, I've got 2 new features that have been added into the cloud-based Lightroom that I want to show really quickly. They're actually pretty big additions. So if you like to use that version of Lightroom, definitely stick around for a few more minutes so I can show you these couple new tools there. Okay, so we're over in the cloud-based Lightroom app or the non-classic Lightroom app. Let me make some quick adjustments here. Let's just say we want to brighten the exposure a little bit. Maybe we're going to bring those highlights down a smidge. Maybe we're going to bring our black point down to add some contrast in. Play with the tone curve, etc., etc. Just quick and dirty just for the sake of example. So if you're familiar with Lightroom Classic, it's had for years now a mode called Reference View, which lets you pull up a second image while you're editing and use it as a reference while you're working on another image. So you could get those 2 images to stylistically match as best as possible. So you could try to improve your consistency from image to image if you're working on a series of similar photos, whether it be portraits or landscape photos like this, what have you. Unfortunately, the cloud-based version of Lightroom has not had anything like that. They recently added a compare mode, but you still couldn't do any editing. Well, I'm very happy to say that they have finally added in the ability to edit while you're in compare mode. To do so, simply come down to the lower left here. You've still got your compare view option. Now, if I click this, it's got that original photo on the left. I can grab any photo from my film strip down below, pull it in, and now this is actually a little bit better than Reference View in Lightroom Classic because you can edit either of these while you've got the other image pulled up on the screen. To know which one you're going to be editing, just look for the image with the white border around it. So right now, the right-hand image is my primary, so that's the one I would be applying any edits to. If I come over here and click on this one, it's now got the white border, so any edits I apply would be applied to this image. But we want to try to get this one to match this one I just did those quick and dirty edits on. So I've got it highlighted with the white border. So again, I can come in here and say, okay, well, I probably want to bump that exposure maybe a little bit, pull down the highlights a little bit, I know I added in some contrast by dropping the blacks. I made a tone curve adjustment. So I can do all of this now while easily referencing right on the same view that other image I already edited. So I don't have to bounce back and forth and try to gauge it that way. I've got them nicely displayed side by side so I can work and view at the same time. And again, the nice thing here is, let's say I do something on this particular image. Let's just pretend I come in here and say, well, I want to apply Adobe Landscape as my profile instead. And I actually like that. So now I want to apply that on the first image that I edited. Instead of having to come down to the film strip and select it and then flip flop and everything, I just simply have to click on the image, make sure it's got the white border. Now I can come up here and quickly apply the Adobe Landscape profile to that as well. This may not seem like that big of a feature, but that reference view in Lightroom Classic is one of my most used tools, especially when I'm working on a set of photos that I do want to ensure I've got a consistent look across that set. So now finally, this was a huge gap that I felt still remained in Lightroom Cloud, and there's still plenty remaining, and we won't get into that. But finally, this particular gap has been closed. This is a huge win. Definitely something to keep in mind as you're working on your photos. Now, I'm just going to select this image again. Let me go back to just a single image view. And the last thing I want to show is a feature that has been in Lightroom Classic for a little while now, but it wasn't added to the cloud-based Lightroom for some reason at the same time. So once again, this will be an example of a gap between the two apps that they have now closed. If I come into masking here, and let's just add a simple linear gradient. Let's just drop the exposure really aggressively, and we'll drag up. And just, again, example's sake, not going to be going for artistry here or anything. But I've darkened down this bottom portion of the image with a linear gradient. Let me actually back this off a little bit. Let's drop the saturation down just for example's sake so you can see what's going on here. And we'll boost the whites up because why not? So previously, if I'd liked the general effect, but wanted to either raise the intensity of it or reduce the intensity of it, I would have had to have come in here and let's say I wanted to minimize it a little bit. I would have raised the exposure a little bit. I would have pulled the whites back down a little bit. I would have brought the saturation back up a little bit. So if I had 8 different slider adjustments applied, I'd have to go in and tweak all 8 of those sliders. Now what they added in Lightroom Classic and that we've now got here as well is the masking amount slider. So now instead of having to go through and adjust every single slider adjustment, I can simply play with the masking amount, and I can either drop it down all the way to 0, or I can actually raise it up above 100 and make those adjustments more intense than what I could have before. For instance, let me clear these out really quickly. And let's just go with, say, boosting our shadows. Right now, I'm at the max level of shadows I can get at plus 100. But now with the amount slider, even though this isn't the best example because there's not a ton of dark shadows where I had that linear gradient applied, but I can still raise those shadows up even more because now I can go above that 100 value on the amount slider for the overall mask. Now it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. It doesn't mean I'm taking the shadows up, say, all the way to 200, but it is raising it an additional percentage above and beyond that maximum that I could have gotten on the shadow slider or the highlight slider or whatever before. So now if I've got a slider maxed out and I want to apply more of it, instead of the old way where you had to duplicate the mask or create a second mask and then apply that adjustment again to the additional level you wanted to, you can try to just use the amount slider here to get the additional little boost you need without having to go through the effort of duplicating or creating additional masks. Okay, and there you go. My top 10 new features that have come to Lightroom and Lightroom Classic. Again, if you want a deep dive of everything that's new or updated or fixed, whatever, be sure to check out that blog post I've linked down below. That'll give you all the details you're looking for. And of course, if you've got any questions, comments, whatever, feel free to drop those in the comment section down below, and I will do my best to respond as quickly as possible to get you the help you need or to take it into consideration for future videos coming up. Speaking of which, I didn't necessarily do deep dives on the content in this video today. I really wanted to show it and provide a baseline of how to use the new tools, but in the coming days and weeks, I am planning on putting together some additional videos that'll take a little bit of a deeper look at some of the things like content-aware healing, the people masking tools, object masking, and whatnot. And last but not least, once again, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and if you really want to show your appreciation, don't forget to hit that thanks button down below to make a small contribution to the channel directly. It'll help ensure I can continue to produce high-quality content like this going forward. Once again, always appreciative of that support, and until next time, take care.